Next on the show, we have Jeffery Halter, a corporate gender strategist. He is a leading expert on advancing women and engaging men. He consults with senior leaders to move from concept to execution on 3 simple reasons to invest in women: to grow revenue, to improve operating profit, and to enhance company reputation. Well, welcome to the show, Jeffery.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Yes. So I'm very curious. Women. And I think I'm somewhat of an authority.
You take the lead on this
I'm a
one.
little bit of an authority here on this.
Yes.
We do spend a fair amount of money. We have more master's degrees than men currently do, at least if my statistics and reading is correct. We make a lot of the household decisions around large purchases, the home that we will live in, the vehicle that we will drive, and yet it doesn't seem to have that part of the information, if you will. It hasn't impressed corporate America the way it should. So what are you adding to that?
Yeah, what it's really doing is framing up that business case that you just talked about in dollars and cents. Okay. So as an example, women are the economy of the United States, $7 trillion. They influence 83% of every B to C purchase made in this country, including the items.
Business to consumer.
Business to consumer. Oh, by the way, women buy more men's underwear than men do. So literally every category you can imagine, women are the leaders in. But companies haven't articulated that business case into meaningful dollars for them. So that's one of the things I do. I help companies create strategies about advocating for women, advancing women. But then the other side of the coin gets into the war for talent that's going on and everything that we're hearing in the news about Me Too and everything else. Companies are realizing that 85% of new entries into the workforce are women, people of color, and minorities. So think about that. The workforce looks significantly different, but it's compounded by 10,000 boomers a day, largely old white men like myself, leaving the workforce every day, every week, every year for the next 7 years until we're gone.
Yay, jobs for millennials.
Yes,
Yay.
oh, millennials are going to, any job you want, David, you've got it. But what it says is smart companies are actually using the Me Too movement and initiatives like this to talk about how do we get better. They're not ignoring the conversation. They're using it to get better.
Agreed with you that the Time's Up and Me Too movement will definitely shift what is happening, the paradigm for women in corporate America. So how many of these companies, you mentioned being smart, how many of them are currently smart? What percentage do you see?
Yeah, it depends on how you define smart. I would say anywhere from 50 to maybe 150 of the Fortune 500.
That's it?
All right.
That's it.
That's very small.
Is
That's
it
very
the bigger
small.
ones, the smaller ones, medium ones?
Primarily larger companies, you know, and how do you gauge success? And so you have to look at qualitative measures. So, 150 companies have signed the Pledge for Parity on wage equity. Last week, 40 companies set out and said at the Makers Conference they're going to implement initiatives for women. If you go to Diversity Inc., the top 50 or 100 companies to work for women. So if you look at the Russell 1000, if you look at small businesses, there's a lot of work to be done. And these are the companies that are really struggling.
Well, you mentioned how do you measure success? And part of how I measure success as a woman is there a seat for me in the boardroom? Is there a seat at the table? Is there a seat for women to run companies, to be directors of departments, and to really have their voices heard and their opinions matter? So that's how I view that.
Yeah, and that's a huge gauge and a metric. And the research is overwhelming. When you add women to the mix, when you add more women to your board, when you add more women to your departments, you get exponential business results. But companies aren't doing the hard work to figure that out.
So, but wait a second. Wait. So all the big companies that all inspire everyone, Apple, Google, et cetera, have horrific inequality between men and women, at least in terms of representation. And it's not for lack of trying. Why is it still like this then?
What happens is it's not one thing. Think about this. We've been talking about advancing women for 20 years, for 40 years. If there was one solution, we've had brilliant people working on this for a long time. It's not. It's 20 interconnected strategies from the marketplace to the workplace that conspire to hold women back. Everything from your performance management system to how you hire, to how you select, how you mentor.
So
how
there's
you
inherent
sponsor.
bias in all these.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely right. What I'll tell you as you work with big companies, and this just shocks people, but it's true. So you've got a performance management system, short story, and you grade people on a 1 to 5 scale. In your department of 10, you're going to give a 5, some 4s, some 3s, some 2s. And oh, by the way, I'm going to give David a 4 and Holland a 3, just because you get it better. You know, you just think the way I think, but it's no big deal. It's 1 point. When you cut this by 1,000 employees, 5,000 employees, 10,000 employees, what you find is women and people of color are given a 0.0 to 1.5% rating lower every year. So think of the long-term compounding effect of that. But you, me, the manager, I just think, I don't know, David gets it and Holland, oh, sometimes she's hard to work with. That's what it looks like, and that's what systemically,
So
that's just one issue that holds companies back, not women, companies.
So let's talk about women. Let's talk about women against women or for women. Do we find that then when women finally start to bubble up to the top and they rise within a particular corporation or industry, do we find that there is support or not? I know for a long time it wasn't. 20 years ago it really wasn't. What is it like now?
What we find and what the research bears out is there's about 4 cohorts of women in the workplace today. There are a number of women who had to fight their way to the top. And it's well documented that many women are actually harder on other women. Yes. It's a scarcity mindset. There's another very large population that believes we're in this together. And oh, by the way, there's a lot of men in that group, it's never talked about. But there are a lot of men who want to help advance women for all the right reasons. And then you've got a couple of benign groups. You've got a huge group of workers that just want to show up and do their job every day. They don't really care about the gender thing. And then you've got millennials, and not to pick on millennials, but I have this conversation with a lot of young women to say, I don't understand why we're having this conversation. This is my mother's conversation. And what you don't see is you may have a multicultural, multi-gendered friendship circle, but when you join a big brick and mortar company, you are governed by what goes on in that company, not your friendship group. And you need to be aware, at least, that these biases exist and how you can move forward.
Yeah, no, it's really important. But Jeff, why women? Why you? Out of all people, because most men would just be like, "I'm a guy,"
Who's the
like,
guy,
exactly.
I'm a guy that supports women, and I keep going to
I
work.
support you, but yeah, I'll take that promotion and that better raise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why the work focus on women?
It's just good business. It's just good business. We're not going to be successful without this strategy. And this goes back to 1990 when Tom Peters was advocating this strategy. And I've just kind of picked up on this, and it's so interesting because I work with a lot of executive teams. And Holland and I could go in and say the exact same thing to the 12 men sitting there. And they look at you and say, "Oh my God, she's a raging feminist."
Raging.
Raging. Are you feeling my rage?
And I'm the smartest guy in the room. And we've said the same thing. What they don't realize is it's their bias on who the messenger is. And sometimes men need to hear it from other men. I'm not saying that's fair. I'm just saying that's sadly reality today.
Wow.
So
Well, we did elect a president of color before we elected a female president.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true.
We tend to glaze
Yes.
over that fact. Yeah.
Yes. I don't glaze over it, but I am very aware of what
Well,
happens.
as a man,
Yes, yes.
No, I see a lot of bias against females everywhere. Institutional bias.
Well, what's interesting today is it's very subtle. It's not 1980s Mad Men. Now, there is overt sexism out there. I will grant you that. But what it is today is it's really defined as micro inequities, little differences that women feel that men aren't even aware of.
So because we have the right brain, left brain differential, and women are primarily that right brain and men the left analytical, do you find that because parenting is changing and more fathers are much more involved and there's paternity leave, and again, our culture, it's a slow shift, but we are shifting. Do you find that this is then ending up in corporate America and it is opening up the neural pathways a little bit to change?
Very, very slowly. Because even in companies that have very aggressive paternity leave for men, very few take it. And so you think about this. So companies who have basically a ranking system, many of the big consulting houses or other companies, Apple, Google, very progressive companies have 24 weeks of paternity leave. Men take about 3 weeks, and women take about 24 weeks.
Oh, goodness.
And it's because
Our
I'm
bodies do go through a little bit more.
Just a little bit.
I'm concerned I'm going to get passed over if I
you
take the
time.
24 weeks. And so you can have a great program or policy, but if nobody uses it, and then do we assess that if people take this, are they hurt later in their career? Because going back to performance management, so you leave and have a child, and you don't. So I give you the 5 because you were there all year, and I give you the 3 because, well, you weren't there all year. That only makes common sense. No, I'm punishing you. And so smart companies are grading you for the time you were there and the work you accomplished to keep you on track moving forward with your male peers.
Well, the actual performance, which is what it's
Absolutely.
supposed to be.
Yeah,
based upon.
you have no control over this.
Right.
So, yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
So Jeffrey Halter, author of Why Women. You can get it on Amazon, right?
That's correct. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me in.